We now welcome our international keynote speaker, Dr. James Harty. James lectures at the Copenhagen School of Design and Technology. James studied architecture at the University College Dublin, where his masters compared house typologies against urban morphologies in Dun Laoghaire in the Republic. He then took a PhD at Robert Gordon University, where he researched the impact of digitalisation on the management role of architectural technology. He's been senior lecturer at Copenhagen School of Design for 12 years, and he's going to present to us online on sustainability and BIM. Okay, James, I'm going to advance to your first slide. Please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. First time that I've done this over live streaming, but we'll see how it goes. So next slide, please.
Okay.
Can you all hear me loud and clear?
Yes.
Yes.
He can't hear us. Go on, move on, next one.
Yes, we can hear you, James.
Yes. So next slide, please.
Okay.
Okay, I'm losing. Yeah, I see it now. Yeah, fine. Next slide.
We have a brick.
I just need to get up to speed. Yeah. Thomas Main, you have that slide or?
Yeah.
Yes, we have Thomas Main.
Yeah.
There we are.
Back in 2006, he was saying that if you want to survive, you are going to change. And we've been looking at that ever since. Now, we're all very comfortable in the building roles where we have a brick, you can seal it, you can deal with it. But, next slide. If we look at, you're going backwards.
No, forward.
It's a time.
There's a slight time lag if he's watching on the video.
We've got the Mayor of London with a brick, James.
Yeah, next slide, please.
Okay, we're advanced.
Okay. Your Google Street View has an ability to look at what the street looked like 5 years ago. Now, if you have we moved on to the next? Yeah.
Yes, if you want
now,
the next slide.
If you quickly go through these, you can see the devastation that has happened Detroit in the last few years. And the question has to be is how sustainable was Detroit? I've just been in Boston recently, and every second car is a Toyota. What's that telling us about car industry? So now I want to move on to the cost of carbon.
Okay.
And this is a little video that will run, and we'll just let it run.
Okay, we'll play it now.
Good.
It's like everything you know and love that you just see gets swept away in the air.
The wind is just shifting continuously.
I've been through several years like this, but not this long and not this wet.
So this is the cost of carbon pollution. We may not realize it, but climate change is affecting us, all of us, right now. We're seeing it all over the news, from the bottom of the oceans to the tops of the mountains, and in the faces of victims across the globe. How did we get here? Let's start at the beginning. It's 1824, and French physicist Joseph Fourier uses a base and some cork to figure out that there's an atmosphere trapping heat and making the Earth habitable. Right about this time, we also hit the Industrial Revolution, the birth of large-scale manufacturing and coal power, and the beginning of the carbon boom. 1896 rolls around, and a couple scientists figure out that CO2 from burning all that oil and coal could affect global temperatures. The numbers based on these fuel consumption rates showed that we had a few thousand years before we had to worry. So we didn't. Then the 1960s came, and things started getting ugly. No, worse. Charles Keeling had captured enough data to determine that carbon levels in the air were directly related to the amount of fossil fuel burned, and that levels were going up. In 2010, NASA declared 2000 to 2009 the warmest decade on record. But hey, what does NASA know?
One small step for man.
Oh yeah, that. And that's sort of the way it's gone. Which brings us to today. Today we live in a world of extreme erratic weather. And here's the kicker. It's costing us big time, right now. In 2013, insurance losses from flooding in Central Europe were estimated at $3.9 billion. In Australia, the 2013 Denali fire alone cost roughly $87 million. And these costs don't just end with the massive damage control bills. The effects ripple through our lives, costing us in other ways. Take Hurricane Sandy, for example. The initial damages cost roughly $65 billion. But what about the small business owners that either lost merchandise, customers, or their entire business because of flooding? And it's not just money. Some of us are paying with lives and livelihood. Others are paying in pain, damage, and suffering. In fact, the climate crisis is recognized as one of the world's leading threats to political stability and national security. The point is, we are all paying today for carbon pollution. Every one of us. We're paying in dollars, in lives, in jobs, in lifestyles, in every way imaginable. This is not a theory. It's not an opinion. This is the cost of carbon.
Okay, if we can advance to the next slide, then we can see that the RIBA has come out with a plan of work.
Yep.
And essentially the plan of work is adding and padding around procurement method with a strategic definition at the beginning and in use at the end. If we move on to the next slide,
Yep.
we can see that comparing the old RIBA plan with the new one and looking at the McLeamy curves, that where most used to be on the old plan in the central part, that has now vanished. We're looking at more work being done earlier, and we're looking at eventually production drawings will probably come free. So this is not being reflected in the way fees are being paid, and it should be readdressed so that this happens. The next slide,
Yep.
we can see the BIM maturity plan, which everybody in the room is probably familiar with, and we're beginning to bring in methods where we can actually address this. Next slide.
Yep.
Are we on the Kyoto and new buildings?
Yes.
Yeah. If we look at what's happened over the last 20, 30 years, we can see that by working with the fabric of the building can only bring us so far. If we want to make 2020 energy buildings, we have to start looking at producing energy, and most importantly, we have to start looking at carbon dioxide sequestration. And this needs to be brought on board sooner than later. Next slide.
Okay.
We're looking at digitalization and opening a new matrix of analysis, performance matrix, and simulation to take center stage, instead of the trusted pencil, which cannot be tested. Next slide.
Yes.
If we start doing modeling, and what I'm presenting here is work from my students, you can see the old model used to be hard, timber, paper, whatever, whereas if you click onto the next slide, you can see that my students have modeled some Palladio buildings with exceptional result. So next slide, please. You can just see some examples there. What I want to move into now is the material library with Revit. And this is where we start to take modeling, and by using the material library, we can actually start putting out specifications. We can actually begin to start getting that every time something appears in the building, a piece of concrete comes into the spec. If a carpenter is working, his work comes in. So we can begin to get the specification to be generated out of the work, out of the model. This has big implications. And there's an example then showing how it is populated so that the different parts of text come in. And this is quite similar to how the BIM toolkit will work, I imagine. Where this becomes incredibly, is I'm looking at time and price and cost. And here dynamically you can see as a wall is being built, the different prices are populating the different areas. Change a wall from concrete to timber, and the concrete goes out and the carpenter comes in. This is the dynamic use of specifications and using BIM as the potential it has to offer. So can you tell me when that video finishes?
Yeah, we're a little behind you.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, it's fine.
Now this is all student work from the Copenhagen School of Design and Technology. I will go in a little bit about how we achieve this later on.
Okay. Okay. Just the credits coming up now.
Okay. So if we move on to the next slide,
Yep.
what we're saying is that this used to be how we would hand over a building. We'd give them all of these boxes with drawings, all the specifications, all the reports, and the facilities manager would at a later stage have to burrow in through all of this information to find the serial number of a valve or whatever. This does not work, and we need to start looking at methods to digitalize the whole strip flow. If we move to the next slide, there are three pillars of excellence: post-occupation evaluation, evidence-based design, and better project briefing. We need to employing these methods in order to give us better information and better design. Within modeling, and move on to the apps box, we have applications that can help us in how we look at our building. We also have bots, which are little Google search engines that once you place a window in a building, it can go off and find all the windows that are out in the market that fits that size. As you go through your levels of information and levels of detail, and you decide that the window is 2 opening panes, that it is aluminium, it is timber, whatever, that shortlist gets trimmed down and down and down until when the contractor takes it over, he can just right click and say, I can use this window manufacturer or that one. If we move on to the next slide, small to medium businesses are 99% of the construction sector. So people need to be fluid and need to be able to adapt and go with this. And I believe that being the size we are, they can do this. The next slide. As we begin to model, we can better inform through performance, through analysis, how we make our decisions, giving us better informed design. Next slide is a student project from a 1940s building which is being renovated. Next slide. Using a drone. Using a drone and capture software, they were able to capture the geometry of the building. In their work on the building, they were able to go into the inventory of carbon and energy, and by putting the carbon values on the different elements in the building, we could begin to extract how much carbon was actually in this building. Next slide, you can see a typical page in this inventory. Relating this to Revit or to BIM, within the BIM package, you can go in and you can actually open the properties in materials, and by default, both physical and thermal are turned off. Just turning these on starts to make these properties available to us in our analysis and simulation. Going into project parameters, next slide, you can actually go in and generate these parameters, for example, embodied carbon or embodied energy. And using the inventory, you can put these values in, which then can be extracted into schema and next slide. Now some slides are appearing just showing you how you can become immersified in the digital world. The first one shows Recap, which is a capture software that can, using a drone, you can capture the geometry of an existing building. This then can be analyzed as a mass. This then can go on to produce your general arrangement drawings, your details. You can do what is being demolished. You can actually show what is being converted. Are we on slide 30?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Next slide. Taking that into Navisworks, you can then begin to process. Here we're looking at a new floor being laid, and you're able to go in and timeline that so that you can find out how long will it take for the floor to be laid, etc., etc. How many people, what your materials are, extracting everything you need to know. Next slide just shows more of that operation.
Right, and then behind.
And slide in this section shows how you can do collision detecting, etc. Slide 34, sustainability, energy consumption and embodied carbon appreciation are all a result of poor management and abuse of the finite resources this planet has to offer. Another project, the next slide, was a biomass algae reactor. Here I took the not very nice decision, but to put everybody in this housing block into effectively a fishbowl. Now the reason we were so extreme was because of the numbers backing it up. Going on to the next slide, you can see that such a system could actually use enough energy, 13 tons per year of CO2, and give us 38,000 kilowatts per year per block. Because it's such a small microcosm that it doubles and quadruples faster than any other bio food. This was exceptional. There is an example of a building like this down in Hamburg, which is on the next slide, where you can just how the panels work. And on the next slide, you can see how the refit of this 60s tower block was turned into a nice habitable place to live. Can you tell me when we go up to slide 39?
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Now moving on to augmented reality, I don't know how many of you have kids, but all the kids I know all know that this is a scanner where when you hold the box of Lego onto the scanner, the contents of the box are magically built up on the screen. Now they accept this without any problem. This technology is available for us to use in the building sector, but we are not using it as much as I would like. If you go on to slide 40, you can see how a lot of manufacturers are now offering, in this situation, furniture where by using the app, you can see this chair in your room in this color. So you can actually make decisions on would you want this chair or not. This technology is here now. We should be using it on the building site. Next slide shows how we can take the model and we can put it onto our handheld devices. This is a timeline running that shows that each element in the building is coming in at a number shown at the top of the screen. So we are controlling how it gets built on site and how it's happening. Coupled with GIS, this gives us the ability to use augmented reality to look at what's happening on the building around us. Put it up to today's date, and holding your iPad or whatever it is, your Google Glass, you can see are you ahead of schedule or are you behind schedule. This would be an incredible tool for a site manager, for a project manager. It would take so much of the problems off-site and make it a much better place to be. On the next slide is a one-unit simulation showing student work again, where it is prefabricated apartments where you are watching, in time, you are watching how one block of apartments gets built. It's happening fast because the units are prefabricated, and where the lull comes is where the vertical circulation is being built on site at the back. I would like to go on to the next slide rather than let that finish because otherwise we run out of time.
Okay.
In the next slide you can see how the whole site is being developed. The red work is excavations for a car park, and then you can see the foundations coming in for the first set of apartments, followed by the second, and all the time you're looking at a running number up in the top left, which is showing how many days into the site we are and what is happening. So we are back in control as to how we can build and take our buildings onto site. The student got so carried away here that he took it all the way to planting trees and landscaping at the end. But it means we're back in control of what's happening on site. think you get the gist of what's happening. So if we take the next one again, this is for a building that the reason I've shown it is because it shows you to what detail you can take your process of construction down to. The gable wall here will be broken all the way down to the timber members, the insulation, the different membranes that go on, just to show you that we're back in control.
Okay.
So if we go on to the next slide, 45, what we're saying is that there is scalability in this. That by doing this, we get back in control of buildability, and it's both sustainable and it's digitalized. We go on to a new little video, which is the price of carbon. If you run that there, I will take a little breather. It's similar to the first one, with one significant difference.
Your bank account. You keep a close eye on them. You pay for your groceries. You pay for your car. You pay for your stuff. You pay for your roads, your schools, the things we all share. You know what else you're paying for? Carbon pollution. Oh yes, you're paying for carbon. Science tells us carbon pollution is the leading cause of climate disruption. The burning of dirty energy is raising our planet's temperatures, which makes extreme and erratic weather more likely. The result? We've been living in it.
2012 was the hottest year in the United States since weather scientists started keeping records.
And half of all U.S. counties were declared disaster zones due to last summer's crippling drought. And because of the droughts, wildfires scorched 1.5 times more land than usual. On the East Coast, crazy storms have led to record-breaking flooding. We've always had extreme weather, but now, thanks to carbon pollution, we have weather on steroids. And we're paying for it.
Congress has agreed on more than $50 billion in relief for the victims of Superstorm Sandy.
The costliest global disasters of 2012 were Hurricane Sandy, cost $65 billion, and the year-long Midwest Plains drought that cost us $35 billion. Drought relief, disaster relief, battling wildfires, building seawalls. All these expenses add up, and that's the price of carbon. But big oil isn't paying, and big coal isn't paying. They are using the atmosphere as an open sewer while you are paying the tab. Through taxes, medical bills, higher food prices, insurance rates, and more. But no wallet in the world is big enough. It's time to take action. It's time to tell the world. We are paying the price of carbon. It's time to put a price on carbon and make the polluters stop the carbon destruction. Tell your friends, tell our leaders, it's time to have the carbon conversation. I think that's everything.
Now what I think these two videos do is they tie up how our built environment has a knock-on effect to how climate change is affecting us. And in the next slide, there's a little something to think about. The Earth is 4.6 billion years old. Let's scale that to 46 years. We have been here for 4 hours. The Industrial Revolution began 1 minute ago. In that time, we have destroyed more than 50% of the world's forests. This is patently sustainable. And that's the last slide. Next slide, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
I hope that went okay over there.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes. I think we've got a little bit of time to have 1 or 2 questions for James. Is that okay?
No problem.
Does anyone have a question for James? I've got one. You would have really enjoyed our conversations today about product manufacturers and product data templates. And I'm interested to know, in the context of our arguing about why we don't have product data, if you can tell us a little bit more about your bots project where the products are selected through the design process? Is that something that you're working on at the university at the moment?
Sadly, no. It's the theory, we haven't been able to put it into practice. But it should be. I mean, all you're doing is putting Google search engines into the model. And they can quite happily go away and find the product that fits the specification as you have it. I can see parallel work with, as we go deeper into our levels of detail and levels of information, that we can bring these LODs, LOIs into the model. This can be done over in the phase parameters part of it in Revit, where you can go in and create a new phase, LOD1, LOD2, etc., etc. Then start making the different elements of your model comply with the different levels of your BIM toolbox. So I see this being automated, and I would relish working further on it to see if we can, how far we can take it.
I certainly think there's a conversation to be had there. Does anyone else have a question for James?
Thank you.
No, I think you've bowled them over. Well, many thanks for your time, James. Really appreciate it, and I hope to speak to you in person soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm available if anybody needs to contact me.
Okay, thank you very much,
Thanks.
James.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
That was great. Is Duncan with us? No. I was just wondering whether we could get the people who ran the groups earlier on to come up to stand very briefly and do a bit of a sum up. Yeah? Let me get the groups out.